The Carrier Pigeon was an American clipper ship that was launched in the fall of 1852 from Bath, Maine. Her value was estimated at $54,000. She was wrecked on her maiden voyage off Santa Cruz, California. History. On January 28, 1853, the Carrier Pigeon left Boston. The clipper was bound to San Francisco on her maiden voyage. As a commercial ship, she was to deliver general merchandise. The ship and her cargo were insured for $195,000. In the mid-19th century, the Panama Canal had not yet been created, and thus the only way to reach the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean was to sail around Cape Horn, an area infamous for its shipwrecks. The prevailing winds in the vicinity of Cape Horn and south blow from west to east around the world almost uninterrupted by land, giving rise to the roaring 40s and the even more wild, furious 50s and screaming 60s. Despite this, the Carrier Pigeon encountered no difficulties rounding the Cape. On June 6, 1853, the clipper was sighted at Santa Cruz, California. San Francisco is located only about 70 nautical miles north of Santa Cruz. The cool California current offshore, enhanced by upwelling of cold subsurface waters, often creates summer fog near the coast, and June 6, 1853, was no exception. As night approached, so did the fog. The captain of the Carrier Pigeon, Azariah Doane, believed that the ship was far from shore, and so he gave the order to sail eastward toward the shore. In few minutes the clipper hit the rocky bottom. Heavy waves rocked the helpless clipper from side to side. The hull was open to the incoming tide. After 7 feet of cold Pacific water rushed into the ship, the captain and the crew had just a few moments to escape with their lives. Because the ship was wrecked only 500 feet from shore, all the members of the crew were able to reach the shore safely. Steamer Seabird and the salvage of the Carrier Pigeon. The news about the wreck reached San Francisco by the evening of June 7. The U.S. Coast Survey steamer Active was sent to the wreck. Later on, sidewheel steamer Seabird joined the efforts in trying to save some cargo and whatever was left of the Carrier Pigeon. Steamer Seabird's salvage operations were under the command of the well-known Bully Waterman, formerly of the Sea Witch. A crew of the Pigeon was initially occupied with landing their own baggage through the surf, and wanted to remain ashore. However, Captain Waterman, with his characteristically forceful personality, set the listless crew members to work in the salvage operation, and kept order on the pitching decks as boxes of liquor came to light. The cargo included cases of shoes and footwear, and although it was to the locals' advantage to drop boxes over the side whenever possible, so that they might be scavenged later for personal use, Captain Waterman put a stop to this. The following morning, near daybreak, the Seabird found herself in troubles of her own. As the wind picked up from the northwest with heavy swells, the Seabird's 2 anchors began to drag. The ship broke free and started drifting towards the very same rocks that just a day before had wrecked the Carrier Pigeon. The owner of the Seabird, Captain John T. Wright, had detailed knowledge of the area, and was able to maneuver his ship so that it beached a few miles south, on the sandy shore of Point Ano Nuevo. This saved the Seabird from being wrecked, and she was refloated a few months later, in October. One more ship, the Goliath, was sent to help out to salvage as much merchandise as possible from the wreck. The Goliath first checked on the safety of the Seabird before coming to the Carrier Pigeon. The Goliath was able to transport both the crew of the Carrier Pigeon and 1,200 packages of her merchandise north to San Francisco. On June 10, 1853, the Daily Alta California reported about the Carrier Pigeon. The salvage operations continued for few more weeks, but by July, the Carrier Pigeon was breaking apart. Local stories regarding disposal of the cargo. Both wrecks appear to have left an impression on this sparsely populated stretch of the San Mateo County coastline. Despite Captain Waterman's efforts, several local stories remain regarding the disposal of the cargoes of Carrier Pigeon and Seabird. According to a guidebook published by the California Coastal Commission, the residents of Pescadero recovered a large quantity of white paint from the pigeon which they used liberally on all the town's buildings, and then maintained the tradition of painting the houses white. An article in the Wells Fargo Messenger states that a stagecoach salvaged from the Carrier Pigeon was laboriously hoisted up the cliffs onto the road, and put into service within a week. The coach, built in Concord, New Hampshire, carried passengers and freight on the Pescadero Road for the Wells Fargo Company for 40 years, and, in 1914, was listed among the company's prized possessions. Another tale relates that an Irishman named John Daly, who was employed driving pigs from Santa Cruz to a Pescadero ranch, discovered some lumps of coal from the Seabird's cargo on the beach at Ano Nuevo. Mr. Daly endeavored to parlay his discovery into money which he might spend on whiskey. Since coal deposits had been rumored to exist in the area, Mr. Daly proceeded with his lumps of coal to Santa Cruz, announcing to Captain Brannan and 3 others that he'd discovered a coal mine at Gassos Creek. After collecting his monetary reward, he led the 4 men up Gassos Creek in search of the alleged coal outcropping, with the intention of escaping and leaving his benefactors behind empty-handed. However, Captain Brannan, who was armed, managed to capture Daly and extracted a confession. Daly was administered a whipping on the spot and later fled the area. Naming of Pigeon Point Lighthouse. A few years later, in 1871, a lighthouse was built on a point near where the wreck occurred. To commemorate the Carrier Pigeon, the structure was named Pigeon Point Lighthouse. This lighthouse is still an active Coast Guard aid to navigation in the area.